declares he has a national tragedy. Then at almost 2:45, a plane crashes near the Pentagon in Washington, the heart of the American military machine. Part of the White House is evacuated amid further terrorist fears. Just after 3, shocking pictures show the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsing, followed by the North Tower. And at 3:30, a plane crashes outside Somerset County Airport near Pittsburgh. Matthew Farrell, Sky News.
Now, some other information. American Airlines has confirmed 2 of its aircraft were involved. There were 156 passengers and crew on board those. And United Airlines says 2 of its planes were also hijacked and crashed. One of them was due to fly from Newark in New Jersey to San Francisco, the other from Boston to Los Angeles, and it's believed there were 110 on board those aircraft. Here, the Queen's expressed her growing disbelief and shock. In a message to President Bush, she expressed heartfelt sympathy and said her thoughts and prayers were with the Americans. Tony Blair's describing the outrage as the most terrible, shocking event. The Tory party has postponed tomorrow's planned declaration of the result of its leadership election, and security has been tightened at London's 3 main airports. Flights to the States have been cancelled. Hundreds of passengers are stranded. So a recap: 2 hijacked planes have crashed into and destroyed the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. It's thought there were around 20,000 people inside at the time. A third hit the Pentagon in Washington, and another one has gone down near Pittsburgh. Finally, the Foreign Office is warning all British citizens overseas to take extra care, and there's an emergency number issued by the Foreign Office for anyone worried about relatives or friends who are in America. That number is 0207 008 0000. That's 0207 008 0000. That's it from the Sky News Centre for now. We'll bring you more updates as we get them.
Thanks for the time being, Martin. More, obviously, as Martin says. Now, we can just remind you, of course, that Flight 175 Boston to LA is still unaccounted for. The other flights, we know what's happened to them. Terrible things, of course. 2 smashed into the 2 huge dominating skyscrapers, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. 1 hit the Pentagon, and 1 was brought down in Pittsburgh, or near Pittsburgh, and exactly how that brought down we can only speculate on at the moment. But there is 1 missing flight. Now, obviously, it's not missing from the US authorities, but as far as we're concerned, they're yet to release information on where it is.
We can only speculate on this, John, and the speculation centres, the experts we've spoken to say the speculation centres around 2 possible outcomes. 1, that the plane has crashed due to some kind of internal disturbance, i.e. a pilot wrestling with a terrorist or something like that. Or secondly, and this seems more likely because of the lack of information of the plane may have been brought down by the American authorities themselves, which in effect means that the US military, the US Air Force, may have had to bring down a plane with American citizens on board, and the obvious outcome of that would probably be casualties of those American citizens.
The emergency number to dial if you are concerned about friends or relatives or business colleagues or whatever, it's 0207 008 0000. It's 6:33 in the UK. In New York, it's 1:33 in the afternoon. The US television network Fox has been bringing us live reports throughout the course of the day on the terrible, terrible tragedies, and we can cross back now and get the latest and just find out exactly what was going on, what was inside the Twin Towers at around 9 o'clock this morning.
Now, where has that money been going? Interestingly enough, it's lifted the price of oil. There's a serious concern that we might go tit for tat into the Middle East on concerns whether this is Osama bin Laden or some Middle Eastern terrorist group, and that this might lift oil prices as a result. We should say that at last check, oil had shot up better than $6 a barrel, now to close to $32 a barrel. So the financial pain, besides the obvious physical pain, could be quite pronounced, and it's something we're watching very closely for you, because if the intent here was symbolic, that is going after a United Airlines plane and an American Airlines plane, then also attacking the financial mecca of the universe was just as symbolic and perhaps longer term more telling. Rick Leventhal was literally in the center of the storm. He joins us now out of downtown New York with the latest. Rick.
Well, it's an eerie scene. It's almost eerily quiet now, except for an occasional ambulance flying by. And just a short time ago, we saw some doctors in scrubs heading on small vehicles towards the World Trade Center, which is still, or what's left of it, still smoking down the street here. Police have cordoned off the entire area surrounding it. The only vehicles passing through now are police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances, and construction vehicles like that. We just had a fleet of ambulances head into the scene. They were staged behind us here. They just went in, which suggests that perhaps they're getting closer to the base of the World Trade Center, where there might be many injured waiting to be rescued, in fact. And joining us now is a former detective with the New York City Police Department, worked with the Commissioner's Office. I know you're very familiar with crisis management. Tom Ruskin just came back from the base of the World Trade Center. Describe for us what you saw there.
There's a lot of fire, a lot of debris. The facade of the World Trade Center is all brought down and hanging there in an eerie type of site that you would expect to see in a movie. Fire is burning around it. Emergency crews are staged in the area but can't get close to it because of the fire and the chance that the debris may come down.
What can we expect to happen next?
Well, after they search for survivors, possible survivors, what will happen is the FBI will take over the investigation. The FBI will launch a massive investigation, as the president has told us this morning, which will definitely go up to Boston, where the planes originated, and thereafter go wherever the trail may lead.
You're familiar with the way the city handles these types of terrorist attacks. You handled the last bombing at the World Trade Center. What's going on right now in the hearts and minds of New York City's finest?
Well, what's going on is trying to rescue those people who may be left behind underneath the rubble, around the area, people who have been hurt. Hospitals have gone to a full state of alert in their triage areas. A block from here, we have a firehouse that is acting as a triage area so people can go in there and be treated with medical personnel. The city is on a high state of alert relative to the medical casualties that we may have.
Do we have to work under the assumption that this is not the end? Is that the way the police department and all the other agencies handle this?
Well, the military has gone on their highest state of alert. We don't know if it's over. We don't know. We know that all planes have been grounded throughout the country at this point in time, and thereafter each step that has been planned for will take effect.
A lot of people might say, well, New York City should have been ready for this. The police department, everybody else should have known that something like this might happen. Was the department prepared? Did it have a plan in place?
The city constantly trains and retrains. The Office of Emergency Management does nothing but train and retrain and get ready for something like this. But we live in a very free society where our gates are open, where people come in to visit. Terrorism has always been a possibility in the United States because we don't live under the tight control of other countries. So a plane hitting the World Trade Center or two planes hitting the World Trade Center was something that could happen. They are trained for it. I don't think that anyone would ever expect it to happen. Two planes in one day in one city, another plane to hit the Pentagon, another plane to crash in Philadelphia.
All right, Tom Ruskin, thanks a lot for joining us. We're hearing that there's a run on a lot of grocery stores in New York City, Upper East Side in particular, where people are starting to panic and thinking they might not be able to get food and supplies and that sort of thing. And obviously the message is not to panic and not to take these kinds of actions. Also, I want to point out they're looking for blood. They need blood donors, and they're asking people if you're able to donate blood to go to a number of locations in New York City to do just that. So something that everyone should think about. Reporting live in Lower Manhattan, I'm Rick Leventhal. Now back to you.
All right. Well, that's our colleagues at Fox News with the terrible, terrible news. As I say, if you're just hearing the news, it is a terrible, terrible situation. We don't know the death toll. It will take days, if not weeks, to find out, and to rescue people, if there are the possibility of rescuing any people from the rubble of the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center and from the Pentagon as well. Obviously, the supplies of blood are running short in Washington and in New York. Now, we heard George Bush earlier on describe a faceless coward who is behind these events. Now, Mike, we suspect it's the dissident Saudi millionaire Osama bin Laden, who promised 3 weeks ago to escalate the holy war against America and Israel. We don't know too much about him, but what we do know, he's a frightening kind of character.
Frightening kind of character, of most unusual terrorist, because he's a multi-millionaire. I mean, a lot of terrorists are millionaires through gangsterism and crime and graft, but he's a millionaire because his family are very, very wealthy Saudi Arabian-based family. Now, you know, this man, I'm sure, is the man that George Bush was talking about, because the information we're getting from Washington is that they're already saying he's the man connected with the attack. His organisation, incidentally, have issued a denial, but I mean, they would do that because you wouldn't want to admit to the sort of terror that you had perpetrated upon the world's most powerful country today. Because despite what's happened today, I think we should remember that this is a one-off attack on America of devastating proportions, utterly devastating proportions. But remember that Britain was under siege for 5 years during the Second World War, day after day after day. We recovered. The Americans will recover from this very, very quickly. They're a resilient country, but meanwhile they'll be heading out to try and find Osama bin Laden. Now, this mystery man, he was born in 1957. He was born in Saudi Arabia. He's a very, very imposing physical figure. He's about 6'5" tall. He's a slim sort of man. He's not unlike the sort of shape of Mick Fleetwood in Fleetwood Mac. I'm not saying Mick Fleetwood's got anything to do with it, obviously, but he's that sort of character, tall, lean sort of a chap. We don't know what he does when he's not plotting terrorism. We know from the descriptions that the Americans have given us that he has brown hair, brown eyes. He has an olive complexion. And he is known to run an organisation dedicated to terrorism and the bringing down of the West.
There's some reports, Mike, that the editor of a London-based Arab-language newspaper said that bin Laden warned of an escalation in the attacks 3 weeks ago, and he is saying that he didn't get taken as seriously as he should have been.
Well, the problem is that bin Laden lives in a remote development in Afghanistan. When I say remote, it's said to be a cave. Now, the reason why he's said to live in this stone dwelling, a cave or whatever you want to call it, is because that makes him almost untraceable from American satellites and the American intelligence network, who've been trying to get hold of him for a very, very long time. Now, he warned 3 weeks ago there would be, and the words he used, according to the CIA, were an unprecedented attack against America and its interests. Now, the point is, the boy who cried wolf issue comes into this, because he makes this threat about once a month and has done for the last 5 years. The Americans are by no means complacent about him, but they do regard him as being an absolute fanatic who they apparently did not believe he would be able to turn his threats into such devastating practical terrorism. He's escaped the clutches of, I do believe, up to 25 different intelligence services around the world, because remember, the Israelis want him as badly as anybody, the Americans want him, European powers want him, you name any Western democracy, their intelligence services are looking for him. And it's also thought that he was behind an attack on a US warship in Aden last year, in which 17 sailors died. I don't know if you remember this, John, but a small boat was loaded with explosives. It rammed the ship, and 17 American Navy personnel lost their lives. Russia also, by the way, and this is the strangest development of international terrorism, Russia believes that he's also aiding rebels in Chechnya. So what you've got here is you've got the Russian authorities and the former KGB, now reformed as the Russian Secret Service, and the CIA in America, both looking for the same man. He is number one on the FBI 10 most wanted fugitive list. He's wanted for the murder of US nationals outside the United States, conspiracy to murder US nationals outside the United States, and attack on a federal facility resulting in death.
Thanks very much, Mike. We'll talk more about bin Laden later, because there are lots of interesting and worrying things to be said about him. Let's speak now to Don Morrison, who's the European editor of Time magazine. And now, Don, I suppose, an emotional day for you, isn't it? You flew back in from the US last night. You were scheduled to leave from Boston today. How do you feel, and Don, and just bring us some of your thoughts when you heard this tragic news?
Well, I think like many Americans and like many of your readers, I'm numb. It's difficult to summon words to come up with generalizations, to string facts together. When you're watching these horrible images on the TV. This is one of these horrible events in American history, like Pearl Harbor, perhaps, that momentarily brings the country together and unites everybody in their grief. I'm struck by the absence of harsh rhetoric. So far on the in the chat rooms that I've monitored, on the news-related websites and on the TV feeds that we get in our office here from the U.S., I've seen very few calls for vengeance. Very few.
John, may I just interrupt there for a second? I'm glad you've made that point, because the thing I'm struck about, and we've been monitoring this story since the first minute it started, is nobody yet is even talking about the numbers of casualties, probably because A, they're so enormous, but B, I think your country is quite genuinely and quite understandably in a state of